I'm commonly asked, how do I know if buying bulk beef is right for me? After nearly a decade of hearing this question, I am confident that if you fall into one of six categories, you should not be considering buying beef any other way than in bulk. Let's see which category you fit into. Is your current way of buying beef the most ideal for you? Have you given any thought to this question or simply just fallen into a purchasing pattern? The goal of this video is to clarify if you are a candidate for buying bulk beef. As a producer of grass-finished beef, it has become clear to me over the years when bulk beef is the right model for someone. If you find that one, or maybe even more than one of these categories relates to you, then you need to start seeking out sources of bulk beef that you can trust, but more on that later. So as not to keep you waiting to figure out which of these categories you fall into, let's just jump right in. Now I want to say at the outset, I'm going to present these in the order that I commonly hear these categories come up. Number one on the list is if you are a person that routinely buys many bulks, but you're constantly running out. Now you may be asking, what's a mini bulk? Well, a mini bulk is going to be you either take a weekly or bi-weekly, every other week trip to the grocery store or to a retailer that you prefer, and you make a big old grocery haul. But you're trying to buy enough for the meals for that period, for that week or 2 week period, but somehow you just always tend to undershoot. You get close to the end of that week or 2 weeks and you're just coming up short and you don't have quite the food that you thought you were going to have. And I have to tell you where I commonly see this happen most at is this is going to be common in households that have teenage boys. Being a teenage boy myself at one point and knowing just how voracious my appetite was at that period in my life, I wanted to gain muscle and gain weight, and that's just a normal thing for young men to want to do. And so we eat a lot. And moms sometimes have trouble keeping up with those demands. And because of that, many times when you get to the end of that period that you've planned for, you find that you don't have what you need and you end up starting to make less optimal choices. And ultimately what happens there is that when moms make those less optimal choices, they don't feel great about that. They feel some disappointment associated with that because they know inherently, as the person who wants to put the best food possible on their family's plates, that they're making some compromise there and they don't want to be forced to do that. So if you find yourself in this category, then buying bulk beef is a way you can alleviate that. Now, the second category here is going to be the fastest growing category. This is the one of the six categories that I'm going to give you on the list. This is by far the one that is becoming the bigger category. And this is going to be you go to the grocery store and you have questions about the meat that you see available to purchase. And again, this could be the grocery store, it could be a large store retailer, but wherever you shop at. And the reason that this is happening is because innately you know that meat is not as nature intended. There's some problems there that aren't being talked about, that intentionally are not being highlighted, that really have you wondering if you should even be buying that product, but you know you need to put food on the table and you do it. But what the bigger problem that's coming up here is that this is telling you there's a problem with the food supply, and you know that, whether it's factory farming or looking at labels and realizing that those labels are marketing rather than truth, that there's no transparency in what you're seeing, that if you're buying a product that has ingredients in it, that those ingredients some of them are questionable if you even realize what they are or can pronounce what they are sometimes, and that some of the practices, the farming practices, that are underlying that meat production behind how those animals are raised or how those animals are cared for, not that they're being abused, but not that they're being able to live out the full expression of their species. That's important because that ultimately does translate into the nutritional quality of the product. If you're having any inkling of any of those things, then buying bulk beef could be right for you because it's going to be a way to alleviate a lot of those. The third category on this list is going to be you only buy bulk from Costco, Sam's, or some other large retailer. Now, initially, this seems like a great idea, and it seems like the way to go. There's access there to the meat you're looking for, at least in part, and you can buy in larger quantities. They generally have good inventory available, but there's more people coming into this category than what you might think. And this is very common individuals that live in a metropolitan area. And that's probably simply because these retail centers, whether it again is a Costco or a Sam's or like, they're found in these areas, so they're easily accessible. But what you begin to realize is that when you've gone and shopped at these locations on multiple trips, you begin to realize that having more choices would be ideal. You really don't have the availability that it initially seems that you have. You're only limited to what you can buy in bulk. I'll give you a great example of this, is that when you go into Costco, you can buy grass-fed beef in Costco. Granted, there's nothing there that says that's grass-finished, so take that for what it's worth. So you as the consumer need to do your own due diligence on that. And you can see the video here, the card for the video, where I dive deep into what's available at Costco. But here's the point. You go in and you can buy ground beef that fits that criteria. But how about steaks? How about roast? Maybe a filet mignon? Nope. None of that's going to be available in a grass-fed option. You're limited to the conventional options. So that's one problem. The next problem is that they don't always have the same inventory throughout the year. So you may see that there's going to be some variances there on different trips. And I don't have a schedule on how they do this. It's just an observation you'll make. You may go 2-3 times and say, okay, great, I was able to find what I was looking for. And you may go on trip 4 and 5 and you may not find what you were looking for. It may not be there. So the availability of that product consistently, that could be a concern. Not to mention that not all bulk is actually equal. And this is where I get into the origins and the quality. And so if you look at, again, that video that is related to Costco that I made for you here, go back and look at that and you'll see where I brought out where even the term organic was being used, but it didn't translate to what by any stretch most people are going to think about should be organic. It was really bending the term to just get it on the label. So that's, if you shop that way, bulk beef could really give you some options that could completely change how you enjoy your meals. Now, category 4 is one of my favorites because you guys are already in the right mindset, and this is going to be the folks who are already buying outside of the system, but you just didn't know that buying bulk meat was an option. You still thought that the option was an a la carte approach. You had to just buy for a period of time of what you needed. But you may think, well, who's already buying outside of the system? And you may qualify if you go to farmers markets, if you have a relationship with a CSA or a community supported agriculture. These very often are going to be providing plant-based foods. So if you're buying in that context, hey, you're doing a great job of building relationships. You're thinking outside of the box of where your food should be coming from and how it should be raised. And if you take that same mindset forward when it comes to bringing the meat into your home and look at bulk beef as an option, one of the things that you'll find is that you'll still be able to build a relationship with that farm or ranch that's supplying the meat. You'll be able to free up more time because that's going to get or can get delivered directly to you. In the case of how we operate at Harvest Hills Ranch, we send it directly to your doorstep. And maybe the bigger piece to this is that it doesn't force you to change anything that you're already doing if you're comfortable with that. It can only serve as a complement to the farmer's market or to a CSA and just increase your buying capabilities from what you currently have already done, which again, I would commend as being a great job for stepping outside of the system. Category 5 is the person who is looking for a fresher product because they know that product has been sitting on that shelf longer than they want to see it, or in that freezer longer than they think that it should be there. And you just know as a consumer, when you walk past meat and you look at it, it just has a different look. It doesn't have the same appearance to it, the same appeal, the visual appeal to it of what you would ideally like to be consuming. And that begins to force you to start to ask questions when you think through the whole production process of bringing that meat to market. How far did that meat travel? And then that forces you to start to ask the question, well, where was this meat raised at? And then how far did it travel to get processed? And then how far did it travel to sit in a warehouse somewhere and then go to the retailer? Yeah, guys, all those steps actually happen. It doesn't just go many times directly from the processor to the grocery store shelf. There's a lot of steps in between that have to play out there. Is it being repackaged at the retailer you're buying it from? What's the nature of the facilities that this is sitting in or that it's being processed at? These are all the things that are going to affect the freshness. And why does that matter? Well, inherently, you may look at it and think taste, and it does, or texture, but it also relates to nutrition. We want the most nutrient-rich food possible. Fresher food, better nutrition. So that, if you're the person who really thinks, you know what, I need a fresher product, then buying bulk beef might really fill in some weak areas that you've been experiencing in your current food supply. Category 6 is going to be the prepper. They always want meat on hand. Now, this category, many would have previously have questioned this category and just the whole mindset around the prepper mentality. However, if you look at the events of the past few years, many of you will probably find that you are in this category, and rightfully so. Many individuals that have come with a prepper mindset acknowledge the fact that our food system is fragile. It is a centralized food system, and it is controlled by very few entities. And if those entities decide to make significant changes, limit access, you're up the creek. You're not going to have availability of food like you would ordinarily have on a day-to-day basis. And your access to meat, well, it could go away very quickly, in a matter of just a few days. 3 to 4 days can clear out the shelves in a grocery store and leave you with no availability of meat to consume. How prepared are you if something like that happens? And again, if you just look back to a few years ago with the pandemic, this wasn't a far-fetched idea. This was actually reality. So when you have that prepper mindset and you want to always have availability of product at your home, maybe one of the most important things that this does is that it immediately creates peace of mind. Do you want peace of mind? I know I do, and I want it in multiple aspects of my life. And if I don't have food on the table, it's going to be pretty difficult to have peace of mind. And frankly, you can't put a price tag on that. There's always going to be an option for dinner if you've planned ahead. And the other thing to note about this is that when the availability and the supply, when availability becomes limited, when supply becomes limited, prices go up. There is that immediate inflationary response that happens to the price of that meat. And if you want to be immunized and shielded from that, then the best thing that you can do is have meat in your freezer so you don't have to depend on what the availability is through the current food supply. I promised you 6 categories, and we've hit all 6 of those categories. And no doubt you've already been able to say, yep, that's the one I fit into, or maybe you fit into multiple of these categories. But I do have one bonus category here for you, and many of you will fit into this one as well. If you're the person that is looking for convenience, buying bulk beef, it's really the best option for you. We all know that time is the ultimate resource. And if you're looking for ways to simplify things, if you want stuff that is delivered directly to your doorstep, you don't want to have to spend your time navigating the grocery store and other retail environments, because that takes a reasonable amount of your time. And you don't want to have to constantly read labels. You just want to develop a relationship with someone, know you can trust that entity that you're buying from and the quality of product and the practices that they're using. If building that relationship and trust is important to you, then guys, buying bulk beef, you're not going to find a better way to go about purchasing your beef. So now that you identify with the categories that you're going to fit into and realizing that bulk beef is right for you, the next logical question you're going to have is buying bulk beef worth it? I knew you were going to ask this question, and so that's why I made a video specifically answering this for you. Take a look at it here on the screen.